Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Whether you are a morning bird or a night owl, I am just super excited that you have decided to join us and welcome to the Richard Watkins Podcast, where we explore the big questions at the intersection of both science and society. Now, the Richard Watkins Podcast is a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network, or SPAN. SPAN doesn't just talk about science, it puts science to work. SPAN bridges science, policy, and community to confront urgent problems and drive meaningful change through policy development, strategic planning, and innovation that improves lives. SPAN turns knowledge into action because science should serve people, not just sit on the shelf. Find out more at span-inc.org. That is span-inc.org. Now, check this out. This episode is very, very special because the folks who brought us this episode are none other than Essie Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services, Inc. Essie Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services, Inc. are dedicated to the value of compassionate funeral service and believe their first responsibility is to the families that they serve. With a wide selection of options, they provide families the ability to create meaningful funeral ceremonies and memorable tributes that truly honor and preserve their loved one's memory. Find out more at S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services.com. That is S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services.com. Now, thank you all so much for joining us, and thank you so much to our amazing sponsors on today's episode who bring us today's topic. And I just feel like it is apropos because today we are going to talk all about death. Yeah, that's a heavy topic. There's actually, I don't know of a topic that is heavier than death. I once heard an individual say that all we can do and all we do from day to day is simply an effort to keep death at arm's reach. That is a very true and powerful statement. Almost every culture, almost every society grapples with death in some way, shape, fashion, or form. Death pulls families apart, brings families together. There is so much in it. I mean, we talked earlier in a past episode about what it means to be a father and how that has changed over time. And death was a huge part of that because often the concept of fatherhood was rooted and related to what is passed down following death, whether it's a title, whether it's property, whether it's resources, it's still hinged on death. In fact, most or a lot of what we talked about in that episode was discovered via archaeology, via the exploration of burial sites. So it cannot be understated the power that death itself has over us all. The role that death plays in shaping society. I know death is something that none of us like to discuss because it is something so very frightening. It touches at the core of who we are. And because it touches us so intimately, each and every one of us at a very personal level, and because there's so much fear wrapped up in it, we tend to shy away from it. Not everyone, right? But many of us do. And polite conversation is not something that we talk about. When discussing plans, like what is to become of us or our resources after death, it's something, unfortunately, that many people don't think about and don't do what is necessary. when they're alive to take care of folks they love after their demise. We don't necessarily, many of us, many cultures do, many cultures don't prepare children to grapple or deal with the death of their parents. It's something that happens. It is something that all of us will experience. However, it is something that we don't think about, and collectively, we don't actually have a firm understanding of. Because of that, we felt that it was a great topic for today's episode. We like to cover very important topics, heavy topics. We try not to shy away from them, and we do our best to provide a different way of looking at these things. Death is something that we all grapple with. It is something that touches all of us, yet no one fully understands it. This is both an inevitability, of course, but it's also a strange mystery and what happens after death. But more to the point, what is death? What is death? It's more ambiguous than perhaps you could ever imagine. Take a moment, think about it. You might think you know what death is. You might have a working definition. You may think in your mind that you have a concrete concept of what death is. And I'm not here to tell you what death is or is not. I believe that it's a very personal, that means it's a very subjective event that we all experience. But what if I told you that death also has a legal definition? There are institutions that are involved with death, right? People die, there are death certificates. There are mores, there are investigations to figure out causes of death, right? And there is a legal definition of death. However, what's interesting is that death is defined differently depending on where you are in the world, but more locally, what state you live or die in. Like, for example, in some states, it can be defined as the death of the brain, like brain function. In other places, it is defined more by cardiac function. And again, it is dictated by state and country. Here, let's do a quick example so you know a little bit more about what I am referring to. Let's see what we can find here. Let's see what we can find here. I'm going to show you a difference here. Now, we're doing this all on the fly. This is all real time. And so I'm going to try to find an example. All right. So, how is death? Let's check this out. Let's see what happens. Bear with me here. Bear with me. Okay, one second here. I'm just looking up some differences of states. Here we go. Check this out. One second here. because off the top of my head, I don't know specifically, the differences between like actual differences, right? So here we've got New Jersey. Now, New Jersey does not strictly follow the Uniform Determination of Death Act. That's the UDDA, unlike most states, right? It requires accommodation for patients and families who religiously or morally object to brain death determinations. And cardiorespiratory criteria is used and may still apply to families that reject neurological determinations of death. So, in that particular situation, you might have a family that doesn't ascribe to defining death as simply a neurological phenomenon. And for those individuals, accommodations are made that utilize a different requirement, that utilize a cardiorespiratory requirement. That's New Jersey. Now, Texas is unique in the way that we talk about death, right? Um, so let's see. Hold on. Under So if someone is brain dead, it seems, and correct me if I'm wrong, it does not seem that somebody can legally be declared as dead in some circumstances, right? In some circumstances, the neurological criteria for being dead cannot be applied in Texas. This intersects with different understandings of how death, especially by the UDDA, which I encourage everybody to go check out, that does look at a neurological component of death, and that is very unique. And so this really touches on the fact that death, although you may think that it is a concrete concept, it has a lot of institutional ramifications, and different states have different legal definitions and different legal requirements and different legal criteria for death. And so that is just something that is just really, really, really interesting. And so I just wanted to provide you with some of that information because it kind of points to the fact that there is a bit of ambiguity in regards to death. And it's not just legal, right? Now, legal is incorporating many concepts of biology to define what death is or what death isn't, right? So, if we can use biological criteria to define what death is, then we're all good, right? Maybe not. Maybe not. There's also ambiguity in regards to what death is or isn't in biological terms, right? So, biology as a study of life and living systems does actually a very poor job at defining life or defining death, specifically defining death. What is death? If a living system is indeed a system or an organism is an organization of cells, then is someone dead when they are legally described as dead, even though they may still have living cells? Like when someone dies, their cells are many times still alive and functioning. Are the living cells the definition of a living person? And so if that is true, then someone is not truly dead until every cell in their body is dead. But that is not how anyone, from my knowledge, describes death. Right. The death of all of the cells of the body are oftentimes what we use to describe decomposition, not necessarily the death of a person, right? Like that's a very different thing, right? How someone can be dead, but their cells can still be alive. When someone is alive, their cells are dying every single day. So, how is that definition even work, right? So, what is a dead person if their cells are still alive? Now, philosophically, death is the loss of self. But is it the loss of self or is it the loss of every cell? It's really, really complicated, really, really complicated. And we can't just look at biology to help us understand what death is or is not, because death isn't the same across biology. Or maybe it is. All people die, all organisms die, but maybe they don't. Case in point, the immortal jellyfish. Now, the immortal jellyfish is being widely studied right now and being observed for a phenomenon where it can revert to earlier stages, escaping aging. Now, these jellyfish, they still die, they get eaten, they get destroyed in the natural habitat. But in regards to death as a concept of like aging, right? It can escape that, which gives it its name, the immortal jellyfish. So the concept of death, even for all organisms or life forms, seems to kind of escape the nice, neat little packaging that we try to put it in. Try to put it in. But again, what again is death? Take, for example, the Portuguese man of war, since we were just talking about jellyfish, right? Now, the Portuguese man of war is oftentimes looked at as a jellyfish, but it is actually one of the most amazing organisms that exist. Now, organisms are amazing, right? And just go out there and check it out. Organisms are amazing, taking different approaches to survival and living and reproduction. They're amazing, but the Portuguese man of war is incredibly amazing because the Portuguese man of war is an organism that isn't just one organism. I think I said that right. The Portuguese man of war is an organism that is not just one organism. Does that make sense? To many people, they would say that does not make sense. An organism is just one organism. But in the case of the Portuguese man of war, it is an organism that is a collection of organisms that alone cannot survive alone, but live together in an organization with each organism fulfilling a different function so the entire organism or the Portuguese man of war can survive. So the Portuguese man of war has organisms in its collection that are responsible for hunting, digesting, stinging, protection, flotation, reproduction. But alone, those organisms cannot survive. It's only when they're together forming the complete organizational structure of the organism, the Portuguese man of war, that they are able to live or function. But to an organism like that, it is a collection of organisms. What is death to it? I know many people might be watching this like, what is the point of this conversation? Why are we even worried about any of this? I mean, I don't know. That is up for you to decide. I just figured since death is something that we all think about, then we should perhaps explore what it even is. And as you can tell so far, it's not as cut and dry as you may have thought it was. Portuguese man of war. I mean, that's just really incredible. What does it mean if one organism is a collection of many organisms? Let's hold on. We really have to break this down because I know folks that are checking this out are just like, well, what in the world is a Portuguese man of war? Like, I really gotta break this down because this is all right. Hold on, hold on. This is folks who know, but folks who don't know will be blown away by what this is, right? And it's wild because I brought it up right after talking about the immortal jellyfish, and a lot of people think of it as a jellyfish, but it's not a jellyfish per se. All right, listen. All right, so the Portuguese man of war is widely described as one of the ocean's strangest creatures. Like, hear what I said, creature, right? So it is looked at as one organism and it operates and functions as one organism. But let's really get into it because it defies all of what we know about what life is and what death is. And keep in mind, if you are to talk about life, then you are talking about death. And if you are talking about death, then you are talking about life, right? This is one of the huge problems with biology, because biology is the study of life and living systems, yet it never defines life and it never defines death or what death is. And so it's really hard to grapple with a lot of these things. And this is the point that I am trying to make, right? It's not clearly defined legally, it's subjective legally, depending on what state you are. But the legal framework is using biological criteria. But when we crack open this kind of biological egg and look inside and see that even in biology, there is not a clear understanding of what death is. Now, many biologists, many folks who could be watching this might say, no, I think there is or isn't a clear. You believe whatever you want to believe, and that's absolutely fine, right? Uh, the same wind blows on us all. You can choose the setting of your own sail, okay? So I'm not telling you this is what you should think about, but it is something to think about, all right? So the Portuguese man of war is not a jellyfish, right? Despite its looks, the man of war is not a single jellyfish or a single organism. Rather, it is a collection of organisms or a colonial organism made up of many individual organisms. Now, each organism is highly specialized. Some organisms, now we're talking about this same animal, right? And it's this animal or organism, like our terms are falling apart in describing what this even is, okay? Now, this organism is comprised of many organisms living together. Now, these organisms have specialized functions. Some of these organisms are responsible for floating. If you've ever seen a Portuguese man of war, it's basically like this floating bubble, just floating on the top of the water with its tentacles drifting underneath the water, waiting for something to bump into it, and it stings it, paralyzes it, takes it up, digests it. That's how it eats, right? Now, some specializing in floating, while other organisms in the Portuguese man of war specialize in feeding, some specialize in stinging, and some for reproduction. Now, together, they function as one organism, and no single organism within the organism of the Portuguese man of war can function alone. I take a breath. I know I need to. It's a lot to handle. It's a lot to take in because it's one of those things where everything where you thought you knew about life runs up into a counterexample. And the Portuguese man of war perhaps is one of those counterexamples, right? And maybe you've squared the circle on this, but if you haven't, that's okay, right? So you've got the float, right? It's the most visible part of this Portuguese man of war. It's this gas-filled chamber. It's usually around to 10 to 12 inches long. It sits above the water like a little sailboat. Yeah, it's got like a little ridge. It's just like a little sailboat, and it catches wind to move the colony across the ocean surface, right? The crest, it's like a bluish pink. It's pretty amazing. Like, if you haven't checked it out, just please just go check it out. Maybe just do a search for it, right? Watch a video of it, right? All right, now its tentacles, it hangs below like a jellyfish, but it hangs below and they're venomous, and they sometimes stretch 100 feet down into the water. All right, these stinging tentacles are used to paralyze and capture fish and plankton, and each thing can be extremely painful, right? A person can get stung by this, and it's extremely painful, right? And in rare cases, it's actually dangerous too, right? Now, you can find a Portuguese man of war in the Atlantic, the Pacific, and Indian Oceans. Now, the paradox of all of this is it's a colony of many individuals acting as one, right? The Portuguese man of war, it challenges our definition of what an organism is exactly what I said. As it is one creature or many, right? Is it one or is it many? It really fails to fit into a group. And when it dies, what does that even mean? Does the whole colony die at once? What happens when one of the organisms and the larger organism dies? This is what we're talking about. What is death for the Portuguese man of war? If you're a single organism within the Portuguese man of war and you die, well, did you truly die? Or are you still living through the organism of the Portuguese man of war that still lives on? Or when does the Portuguese man of war actually die? When it dies, I guess, and there's still organisms that are part of it that are left alive? Is it partially alive? Is that organism still alive? Like, you ask the same questions of the Portuguese man of war that we were just asking of a person, right? A person is comprised of cells that work and provide very important functions to the organism that is the person, right? There are cells that are involved with digestion. There are cells that are involved with reproduction. There are cells that are involved with the cardiovascular system. There are cells that are involved, and the CNS, the central nervous system, the brain, neurons, right? There are cells that are involved with so many different functions that don't all perish when a person is described as being dead. So what then is death even? Or what then is that cell after that person has died? I don't have an answer for any of this. I'm just posing this narrative that goes, maybe death isn't as clear cut as we thought it was. Another thing to perhaps ponder, and I don't know if everybody has these experiences or this exists for everybody or in every single state, but you can be an organ donor. You can be an organ donor. In the case of your untimely demise, for whatever that means at this point in the conversation. But in case of your untimely demise, you can agree while you are living that your organs can be taken and then given to someone who still needs it to live, right? Example, heart, heart donor, right? For a heart transplant. Uh, it was seen on the movie. I don't know if you saw it. I think it's John Q, where the main character's son, he is about to die and receives, if I'm not mistaken, receives a heart transplant that was given to him by a woman who had been killed in a car accident. I think that's correct. And so the heart from the woman that was killed in a car accident was taken out of the woman that was killed in the car accident. So the heart is still alive, right? This is going to our point, right? The person's dead, but the heart is alive. And I don't even know how that really even fits. Again, we're trying to understand what is even death at this point, right? So the heart is still alive. It is taken, and in the movie, is put as a transplant into the young boy, and I believe the young boy ends up surviving. Uh, the question is, does does that woman live on through the heart that is now in this young boy? I mean, is what is that heart even? Right now, I told you many folks describe death as legally, right? Again, it's subjective, but when these individuals are saying someone is dead, when their heart stops, right? They are saying it with conviction, like this is what it is. But in the situation of a heart transplant and that heart is now functioning in another person, what does that mean for that person who once had it and is now dead? Are what is that heart even in relationship to that deceased person? I mean, is that person completely dead, just living on in a new body? Especially since death is, in some cases, described purely as heart function. Is it the heart that is the life? And now that heart that is the life is given a new lease on life by being given a new body? Or is it the other way around? I mean, these are silly questions, but are they silly questions? I mean, I don't think they are because so much of our society revolves around the concept of death. So many things are around and centered around death. Why then is exploring what death is a silly task or silly exercise? I don't know. It's up for you to decide. But a person can die, yet their heart beats on in another person. So is part of them still alive? Where does death end and life continue? What is that? What is that at that point? Again, I think if you asked 100 people, you may get 100 different responses on that. This is my entire point. I've tried to explore this situation with a legal framework, with kind of understanding like the biology of these things, and it doesn't fit into a nice bucket. It doesn't fit into a nice bucket. But needless to say, I listen. I don't care about a Portuguese man of war. Maybe that's what you're saying. I don't care about an immortal jellyfish. Perhaps that's what you're saying. And okay, I do care about organ transplants and so on and so forth. But listen, it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, everyone still dies, which is absolutely true. Everyone dies at some point. I mean, that is a really interesting thing. I once heard somebody, I heard a preacher say, preach as if you are a dying man preaching to dying men. I always thought that was a powerful statement because it says that you should do everything at its maximum, right? If you have an opportunity to speak to someone, if you have an opportunity to communicate to someone, you should do it with the same vigor, with the same passion as if perhaps it was the last speech, the last conversation that you would ever have. And that was the last speech or the last conversation that your audience will ever hear. So you should give it your all. But I guess it also means something else. It also means that we should always give everything, every moment, everything that we have. Because in fact, every day we live is a day closer to our own demise. Every moment that we spend with an individual is moving forward to the last moment that we spend with that individual. People know this to be true, but often they fail to really embrace it and incorporate that into how they live their lives. Because we will all die one day. But when will that day be? That is an interesting question. It could be tomorrow. It could be today. It could be 50 years down the road. We don't necessarily know when it will be. We don't know when it will be. It is the truth that we will die, but when we will die is another thing entirely. And our understanding of when we will die has been changing over time. Case in point, life expectancy. I think life expectancy is an interesting look into this this situation of this guarantee that we will die. But it's not guaranteed when you will die. That guarantee is interesting. What if I told you, many of you know this is true, that life expectancy, which is how long you will live, has been increasing. In the 1700s, in the 1700s, life expectancy was 30 years. Now, of course, people live longer. Some people died sooner. But in general, you were expected to live till you were 30. Life expectancy was 30 years. Sorry, just looking for my chapstick. I had it. Oh, I've got it. It's in my pocket. 1 second. Just keep that in mind. Life expectancy was 30 years. In the 1800s, life expectancy was 40 years. Oh, okay. So in the 1700s, life expectancy was 30 years. In the 1800s, life expectancy is 40 years. So 30 years, 40 years. In the 1900s, life expectancy was 60 years. 30 years, 40 years, 60 years. And we are here today in 2025. Hopefully you'll check this out this year and don't wait until 2026 to check this out. But here we are in 2025. The life expectancy is 73.5 years. So this is what it seems like. So per century, a century goes by, it goes from 30 years to 40 years, an increase of life expectancy by 10 years. Okay. The next century, it goes from 40 to 60. That life expectancy increased not by 10 years, but by 20 years. And here we are, just 25 years into this century, and it has already climbed from 60 to 73.5. I think it's just interesting to really kind of grapple with that information, because if we look at it, it is clearly showing that people are living longer and longer and longer and longer. Now, I don't know if this trend will continue. I mean, we're simply just analyzing a pattern, right? We could go back to 30 years. This pattern wouldn't suggest that. The pattern is 30 years, 40 years, 60 years, and now here we are, 73.5 years. We are living longer and longer and longer. And it really begs the question, if life expectancy or the increase of life expectancy keeps accelerating, and I mean, I guess what is that guarantee of death anymore, right? We're all guaranteed to die, I suppose. But the concept of death is one that is subjective legally, right? Biologically, it's not firm. Different organisms obviously experience death in very different ways, some not at all. Some it's up in the air what it even is. Within humans, it's very difficult. You can pass your organ on to someone else. That organ could live on even though that you are dead, and life expectancy seems to increase over time. What does it mean? That's an interesting question. What does it mean? And will we ever get to the point where we live forever? The pattern obviously would suggest that it'll keep increasing. I have no idea what that even means. Will it keep going? But it really frames the question in a way that makes it very difficult to answer. What is death? It is both something that is subjective. It is both something that is subjective, and it is an event that in which you will experience, but the date in which you experience by the average living person is pushed further and further into the future as the generations and centuries prior to us have suggested. What then does it mean for the future? We already know we have a very difficult time of appreciating the future. We look only into the past to understand our present, as the future is something it's very difficult to grasp. But if we look at the past and analyze where we are now, we have to change the very definition of death. Obviously, everyone experiences it different. You take the time to explore, do what you need to do, grieve when you need to grieve, because everyone experiences this phenomenon of death very, very differently from everyone else. Ultimately, at the end of the day, this understanding of death is very important to our understanding of life, specifically how we should treat one another, how we should approach our own life, and what should we do with every single moment that we have in every single present moment in every single day that we are given. It's important to explore death because it gives us an opportunity to extend and improve life possibly. And if you are someone, like everyone, who has experienced death, who has experienced the death of a loved one, then perhaps these understandings will make that experience a little bit different. I just hope that this conversation, this discussion that we've had here today, doesn't completely solve the question of what is or what isn't death. I just hope it provides you with an opportunity to look at it a little bit different. I want to thank each and every one of you for obviously joining us today. This episode was made possible by S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services Incorporated. S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services, Inc. are dedicated to the value of compassionate funeral service and believe that their first responsibility is to the families that they serve. With a wide selection of options, they provide families the ability to create meaningful funeral ceremonies and memorable and memorial tributes that truly honor and preserve their loved one's memory. Find out more at S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services.com. That is S.E. Thomas Funeral and Cremation Services.com. I have been your host, Richard Watkins. This is the Richard Watkins Podcast, a proud production of the Science Policy Action Network. Again, I thank each and every one of you for taking the time out of your day to join us on another wonderful episode. Take care of yourself. And remember this, that the future is not something to wait for, it is something to build. Take care.